Okay, this is for world history. We're going to continue our trek through the French Revolution and something called the guillotine today. We'll learn about the guillotine, which is the mechanism they used for for executions in France, which was the decapitation or chopping off of one's head. So the name guillotine dates back to the 1790s during the French Revolution, but similar execution machines were used for centuries. The plank was a beheading device used in Germany and Flanders during the Middle Ages. The English had a device known as the Halifax gibbet, a sliding axe. The French guillotine was likely inspired by two earlier machines of the Renaissance era, Manania from Italy and the notorious Scottish maiden, which killed people during the 16th and 18th centuries. Evidence also shows primitive guillotines were most likely used in France long before the French Revolution. Dr. Joseph Ignacio Guillotin proposed the French government adopt a gentler method of execution during the late 1789. He was actually opposed to capital punishment, but argued that decapitation by a lightning-quick machine would be more humane and egalitarian than the sword or axe beheadings that often did not work the first time. Dr. Guillotin helped oversee the development of a prototype of the new machine of executions. The French doctor Antoine Louis designed the machine, and the German harpsichord maker Tobias Schmidt constructed the machine. The first official victim of the machine in April 1792, it quickly became known as the guillotine. Dr. Guillotin tried to distance himself from the machine during the guillotine hysteria during the 1790s. His family later unsuccessfully petitioned the government to change the name during the 19th century. The French Revolution started in 1789 after the storming of the Bastille in Paris. King Louis XVI was eventually driven from his French throne. The penal code was rewritten to say every person condemned to death penalty shall have his head severed. All classes of people were then executed equally, whereas before there was much different depending on the class of person. The first guillotining took place on April 25, 1792. Later, on January 21, 1793, King Louis was guillotined. During the Reign of Terror in the mid-1790s, thousands of enemies, we'll talk about the Reign of Terror later, thousands of enemies of the French Revolution were killed by the guillotine or national razor. Some people complained the machine was too quick, but before long the process had evolved into a high entertainment. People came to watch the guillotine do its job, and the machine was honored with countless songs, jokes, and poems. Spectators could buy souvenirs, read a program listing names of the victims, or even at a nearby restaurant called the Cabaret de la Guillotine. Many people attended executions daily, most famously Tricosius, a group of morbid women who reportedly sat beside the scaffolding and knit between beheadings. Many people played up their executions by offering sarcastic quips or defiant last words before being executed. Some even danced their way up to the steps of the scaffolding. Fascination with the guillotine waned during the end of the 18th century, but public beheadings in France continued until 1939. Children often attended guillotine executions, and some may have even played with their own miniature guillotines at home. A 2-foot-tall replica blade and timbers was a popular toy in France during the 1790s. Toys used the fully operational guillotine to decapitate dolls or even small rodents. Some towns eventually banned the toy guillotines with the fear of they were a bad influence. Novelty guillotines were found on some upper-class dinner tables where they were used to cut bread or vegetable slicer. As guillotines became more famous, guillotine operators also became celebrated. During the French Revolution, executioners were judged on how quickly and precisely they could orchestrate multiple beheadings. The job was often a family business, and many generations from the same family were executioners. The famed Sanson family served as state executioners from 1792 to 1847. And were responsible for executing Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette alongside thousands of others. The role of chief headsman fell to Louis and Antoine de Blair, a father and son duo whose combined tenure extended from 1789 to 1939. Their choice of clothing on the scaffold was known to inspire trends. executioners were a subject of morbid fascination to the criminal underworld. According to some accounts, gangsters and other criminals would get tattoos of slogans like "My head goes to Diebler." Speculation whether heads of the guillotine remained conscious after being cut off started as soon as the guillotine came into use. The debate reached new heights in 1793 when an assistant executioner slapped the face of one of its victims' heads, and the spectators claimed to see the cheeks flush in anger. Doctors later asked the condemned to try to blink or leave an eye open after their execution to prove that they could still move. Others yelled at deceased names or exposed heads to candles, flames, and ammonia to see if they would react. The ghastly experiments were put to a stop in the 20th century, but studies on rats have since found brain activity may continue for seconds after decapitation. The guillotine is most famous for its use during the French Revolution, but it may have claimed just as many lives in Germany after the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler made the guillotine a state method of execution during the 1930s. He ordered 20 of the machines to be placed in cities across Germany. According to Nazi records, the guillotine was used to execute some 16,500 people between 1933 and 1945. The guillotine remained France's state method of capital punishment well into the 20th century. The last guillotine execution took place on September 1977 in Marseille, France. The use of the national razor officially came to an end in September 1981 when France abolished capital punishment for good. Some guillotine facts. Total weight of the guillotine is about 1,278 pounds. The guillotine metal blade weighs about 88 pounds. The height of the guillotine posts average about 14 feet. The falling blade has a rate of speed of about 21 feet per second. The actual beheading takes 2/100ths of a second. And the time for the guillotine blade to fall where it makes a stop is a 70th of a second. So there are, there are a few questions here, multiple choice and the like. Actually, not multiple choice. You have true or false. Sorry, true or false and identification. So do those with text box, and I will see you tomorrow.